December 20th, 1968. A cold winter night in Benicia, California. The clock had just struck 11:15 p.m. when the call came through to dispatch. The officer on duty grabbed his notepad as the caller's voice trembled through the receiver. What authorities discovered on Lake Herman Road that night would launch a manhunt spanning decades. Two young people found shot to death in their car. No witnesses, no apparent motive, no suspects, just two lives cut tragically short on what should have been an ordinary Friday night. The investigation began like many others. Routine questions, canvass of the area, search for shell casings. Detectives hoped for a quick resolution, but this case would prove to be anything but routine. 7 months passed. July 4th, 1969. As fireworks illuminated the skies over Vallejo, California, a second attack occurred at Blue Rock Springs Park. A young couple again. This time one survived. The pattern was emerging. The survivor described the attacker. Average height, heavy set, wearing a dark jacket. But it was what happened next that transformed these local tragedies into something unprecedented in American criminal history. August 1st, 1969. 3 newspapers received identical letters. Inside each a confession. And something else, a cryptogram. 408 characters of symbols, letters, and strange markings. The author claimed that when solved, it would reveal his identity. This is the Zodiac speaking. The letters began. A name authorities had never heard before. A name that would soon grip the nation in fear. The writer demanded publication of his cryptogram in each newspaper, or he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night. The newspapers complied, printing the puzzling cipher in their next editions. Unlike many criminal boasts, the letter contained details only the killer could know. And unlike many criminal cases, this was just the beginning of an unprecedented psychological game between the killer and an entire region of California. The public was captivated. Amateur and professional codebreakers worked feverishly to crack the cipher. Within weeks, a schoolteacher and his wife succeeded where law enforcement specialists had struggled. The message revealed a disturbing glimpse into the mind of a killer who claimed he was collecting souls for the afterlife. But before authorities could process this development, the Zodiac struck again. September 27th, 1969, Lake Berryessa. A young couple enjoying an afternoon by the water. This time, the methodology changed dramatically. Wearing a hood emblazoned with a cross-circle symbol, what would become known as the Zodiac symbol, the attacker approached his victims with a gun and knife. He bound them before attacking. One survived to describe the terrifying encounter. 2 weeks later, October 11th, 1969. San Francisco's Presidio Heights. A taxi driver murdered in his own cab. A radical departure from the previous attacks. Urban setting. Male victim. Professional driver rather than a couple. Witnesses observed a man walking away from the scene. For the first time, police had a description from people who had seen the suspect's face. A composite sketch circulated throughout California. The Zodiac called the police department the next day to claim responsibility. More letters followed, more codes, more taunts, more threats, including one that struck particular fear, a threat to attack a school bus full of children. The children make nice targets, he wrote. Law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions worked tirelessly. Yet for all their efforts, the Zodiac remained elusive. The letters eventually decreased in frequency, then stopped altogether by 1974. The attacks, at least those confirmed to be the work of the Zodiac, claimed the lives of 5 people and injured 2 others. But the killer claimed to have taken many more victims, up to 37 in total. Were there other victims whose connection to the Zodiac was never established? This question continues to haunt investigators. Decades passed. Suspects came and went. DNA technology evolved. Digital analysis emerged. Old evidence examined with new techniques. The 340-character cipher, which had resisted solution for over 50 years, was finally cracked in December 2020. Yet despite all these advancements, despite thousands of man-hours of investigation, despite the scrutiny of countless amateur sleuths and professional detectives alike, the true identity of the Zodiac remains unknown. This is not simply a story about an unidentified killer. It's about the lives he took, the families left without closure, the communities terrorized, the investigators who dedicated their careers to the case, and the public's enduring fascination with one question: Who was the Zodiac? What follows is the complete account of America's most baffling unsolved case. The confirmed facts, the viable theories, the lingering questions. This is the story of the Zodiac, the killer who wrote his way into history and vanished into mystery. The first murders attributed to the Zodiac occurred in a time before digital databases, DNA profiling, or cell phone tracking. Investigators relied on witness statements, physical evidence, and traditional police work. The initial investigation into the Lake Herman Road murders proceeded like any other homicide case of the era. The bullets recovered from the scene were .22 caliber, common, virtually untraceable. No fingerprints were found. No tire tracks could be matched. The young couple had no known enemies. With minimal evidence and no apparent motive, the case quickly went cold. When the second attack occurred at Blue Rock Springs Park on July 4th, 1969, investigators initially saw no connection to the December murders. The locations were 12 miles apart. The weapon appeared different, but one critical difference would prove invaluable: a survivor. The young man who survived described his attacker as approximately 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, heavy set, with short brown hair. He recalled a flash of light, the gunfire, then the assailant walking away calmly, returning moments later to fire additional shots. These details, while limited, gave authorities their first glimpse of the killer. Less than an hour after the Blue Rock Springs attack, a call came into the Vallejo Police Department. A male voice claimed responsibility for both the fresh crime and the murder last year. This call marked the beginning of the Zodiac's pattern of communication, a pattern that would become his signature. When 3 newspapers received identical letters a month later, the case transformed from a local crime story into a regional sensation. Each letter began with the same chilling introduction. This is the Zodiac speaking. Each contained 1/3 of a complex cipher that the writer claimed would reveal his identity. The newspapers faced an ethical dilemma. Publishing might encourage the letter writer. Not publishing might trigger more violence, as the writer explicitly threatened. After consulting with police, all 3 papers published portions of the cipher. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A high school teacher and his wife became fascinated by the published cipher. Working methodically through potential solutions, they succeeded where law enforcement cryptographers had struggled. The decoded message revealed disturbing glimpses into the mind of the killer. He wrote of enjoying killing, of collecting slaves for the afterlife. But crucially, he did not reveal his identity as promised. This deception established another pattern: the Zodiac's propensity for psychological games. As authorities processed this development, the investigation expanded. Every available detective in multiple jurisdictions scrutinized the evidence. Handwriting analysts examined the letters. Linguistic experts studied the language patterns. Ballistics specialists compared shell casings. The connection between the first 2 crime scenes was established. The victims in both cases were young couples in secluded areas. Both attacks occurred late at night. Both involved shooting victims inside or near their vehicles. A pattern was emerging, allowing investigators to anticipate the Zodiac's preferences. Yet when the Zodiac struck again, he altered his approach dramatically, demonstrating an adaptability that would further complicate the investigation. September 27th, 1969. Lake Berryessa in Napa County presented a different environment from the previous crime scenes. A recreation area rather than a secluded lover's lane. Daylight rather than darkness. The Zodiac was evolving. A college-aged couple had chosen a remote inlet of the lake for an afternoon of relaxation. Their peaceful day was interrupted by the approach of a man wearing what appeared to be a costume. A black hood with a white symbol emblazoned on the chest. The man claimed to be an escaped convict from a nearby prison. He brandished a gun and ordered the couple to tie each other up with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline he had brought. This level of preparation demonstrated forethought and planning unlike the previous attacks. After binding the couple, the attacker drew a knife and proceeded to stab both victims multiple times. Unlike the efficiency of the gunshot attacks, this method was personal, prolonged, traumatic. One victim survived despite suffering 10 separate stab wounds. Before leaving the scene, the Zodiac did something unprecedented. He wrote on the couple's car door with a black marker. He listed the dates of his previous attacks, claimed responsibility for all three and included his cross-circle symbol. This physical marking of the scene represented a new level of boldness. Following the pattern established after the Blue Rock Springs attack, the Zodiac called the Napa County Sheriff's Office. "I want to report a murder," he stated calmly. He provided the location and described the victim's car. This communication confirmed the connection between the Lake Berryessa attack and the previous crimes. The surviving victim provided authorities with the most detailed description yet: the hood, the symbol, the weapon, even an approximation of the attacker's build and voice. This eyewitness account added crucial details to the developing profile. Analysts noted the escalation in violence and risk-taking behavior, from shooting from a distance in the first attack, to returning to shoot again in the second, to now physically restraining and stabbing victims while disguised. The Zodiac was growing more confident, more theatrical, and potentially more dangerous. 2 weeks after Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac made his most dramatic departure yet from established patterns. October 11th, 1969, Presidio Heights, an upscale San Francisco neighborhood. The victim was a taxi driver working the Saturday night shift. The 29-year-old cab driver had picked up a passenger in downtown San Francisco. The destination given was an address in Presidio Heights. What happened inside the taxi remains unknown, but the outcome was fatal: a single gunshot to the head. For the first time, the Zodiac committed murder in a well-populated area with potential witnesses nearby. Residents in the area reported hearing a gunshot and seeing a man leaning into the front of the taxi cab before walking calmly away from the scene. 3 teenagers observed the man from an upper-floor window across the street. Their description led to the creation of a composite sketch, the first legitimate glimpse of the Zodiac's face. They describe a white male, approximately 40 years old, with a crew cut, glasses, and a stocky build. The killer took a piece of the victim's shirt, which would arrive enclosed in a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle 3 days later. This trophy-taking behavior represented another escalation. The letter contained details about the murder that had not been released to the public, confirming its authenticity. The pattern of post-crime communication continued. The Zodiac called the San Francisco Police Department from a payphone just blocks from the crime scene. "I just killed a man in a taxi," he stated. Police dispatched officers to the payphone, but the caller had already departed. The officers responding to the payphone call passed a man matching the suspect's description walking away from the area. In perhaps the closest the investigation ever came to apprehending the Zodiac, this potential encounter led to nothing. The officers were responding to the payphone location, unaware that the man they passed might be their suspect. The urban attack generated unprecedented media coverage. The shift to San Francisco proper elevated the case from a regional concern to a national story. The killer, who had previously targeted couples in secluded areas, had now struck in the heart of a major city. No one felt safe. October 14th, 1969. The San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. Inside, a piece of the taxi driver's bloody shirt and a chilling message: "School children make nice targets." The Zodiac threatened to attack a school bus, claiming he would shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. This threat created mass panic throughout Northern California. Schools implemented emergency protocols. Police escorted buses. Parents kept children home. The psychological impact of this threat extended the Zodiac's reach far beyond his actual crimes. More letters followed throughout late 1969 and 1970. Each presented authorities with a dilemma: publish and potentially feed the killer's desire for attention, or withhold and risk triggering more violence. The Chronicle, serving as the Zodiac's primary media outlet, generally chose to publish with police consultation. The letters themselves became crucial evidence. Handwriting analysts confirmed they were written by the same person. Linguistic experts noted unusual phrases and spellings. Fingerprint technicians examined every inch of paper and envelope. Saliva from the stamps and envelope flaps was preserved, though DNA testing was decades away. In November 1969, the Zodiac sent his second major cipher, 340 characters of seemingly impenetrable code. Unlike the first cipher, this one would resist solution for over 5 decades, finally being cracked in December 2020 by an international team using specialized software. What drives someone to not only commit murder, but to announce it publicly. To taunt authorities? To create elaborate ciphers? Criminal psychologists who have studied the Zodiac case point to a complex psychological profile that separates this offender from typical murderers of the era. Unlike many who kill from rage or for personal gain, the Zodiac appeared motivated by a desire for public recognition. His communications reveal a need for acknowledgement of his perceived intelligence. The ciphers, in particular, represented a challenge to authorities, proof, in his mind, of his superior intellect. Handwriting experts noted the controlled penmanship in the letters, suggesting someone who maintained outward composure despite inner turmoil. The precisely formed characters, rarely showing signs of haste or agitation, indicated a methodical personality capable of compartmentalizing emotions. The evolution of both crimes and communications suggests a perpetrator gaining confidence with each successful attack and each published letter. This growing boldness typically indicates someone who derives satisfaction not just from the acts themselves, but from the public reaction they generate. The self-given name, Zodiac, reveals a grandiose self-image. By naming himself, he sees control of his public identity rather than accepting a media-assigned moniker. This need for control extended to his crimes, which showed increasing levels of preparation and staging. Most unusually, the Zodiac appeared to stop killing, or at least stop claiming credit for murders, while most serial offenders continue until captured. This cessation has generated numerous theories. Incarceration for another crime, death, disability, or perhaps a psychological shift that fulfilled whatever need the killings once satisfied. The Zodiac's first cipher, 408 characters divided across 3 newspapers, was broken relatively quickly by Donald and Betty Harden, a schoolteacher and his wife. Their solution revealed a disturbing message about collecting slaves for the afterlife, but crucially, not the killer's name as promised. The relatively straightforward nature of this first cipher suggested someone with basic knowledge of cryptography, perhaps self-taught through military manuals or puzzle books available at the time. The cipher used symbol substitution for letters, with some intentional misspellings and errors. The second major cipher, 340 characters sent in November 1969, proved far more complex. It resisted solution for over 5 decades, eventually requiring specialized software and an international team to crack. The Zodiac had dramatically improved his encryption technique. The breakthrough came from recognizing that the 340 cipher used a transposition method in addition to symbol substitution. The Zodiac wrote the message diagonally, then rearranged it, a technique not immediately apparent to human code breakers without computational assistance. Beyond the major ciphers, the Zodiac sent additional encoded messages, a 13-character cipher, a 32-character cipher, and others that remain unsolved to this day. Experts debate whether these contain actual messages or were merely designed to maintain public interest. The creation of these ciphers required time, planning, and revision, suggesting a person with both intellectual capacity and available private time. The methodical nature of the coding work contrasts sharply with the violence of the attacks, revealing different facets of the perpetrator's personality. Geographic profiling, a technique developed years after the Zodiac crimes, suggests patterns in the killer's movements. The distribution of attack locations often creates a pattern around an offender's home or workplace, with a buffer zone immediately surrounding their base. The Zodiac's confirmed attacks created a rough triangle between Vallejo, San Francisco, and Napa County. This clustering suggests someone with knowledge of and comfort in these areas, perhaps through residence, employment, or regular travel. The locations where Zodiac letters were mailed, primarily in San Francisco and Oakland, provide additional geographical data points. These mailing locations were often distant from attack sites, suggesting strategic movement to avoid connection. The time between attacks and subsequent communications suggests someone with reliable transportation and freedom of movement. The distances covered indicate a comfort with driving significant distances, a common trait among offenders in geographically large jurisdictions. Contemporary analysis of the geographical data points to several potential anchor points where the Zodiac likely lived or worked during the late 1960s. These areas have been cross-referenced with employment records, military service, and other historical data to generate investigative leads. Several aspects of the Zodiac case point to possible military experience. The use of terminology like code name and bus bomb, the knowledge of firearms, the interest in cryptography, and the boot prints at Lake Berryessa consistent with military-style footwear all suggest possible service background. Cryptography was taught to certain military personnel during this era, particularly those in communications, intelligence, or naval operations. The timing of the Zodiac crimes coincided with the return of many Vietnam veterans to Northern California. Investigators combed through service records of military personnel stationed at nearby bases, including Mare Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo, Travis Air Force Base, and the Presidio in San Francisco. Thousands of service members cycled through these installations during the relevant time period. The crosshair, symbol adopted by the Zodiac, bears resemblance to certain military insignia and targeting symbology. While not an exact match to any official emblem, the design suggests familiarity with military iconography. The military connection theory is complicated by incomplete or classified service records, especially for those involved in sensitive operations. Additionally, many veterans of the era moved frequently following discharge, creating challenges for comprehensive tracking. While official investigation treated the Zodiac as an individual, some researchers have proposed alternative theories. One suggests multiple perpetrators operating under the Zodiac identity, perhaps explaining the variations in handwriting, methods, and communication styles. Another theory connects the Zodiac to other serial cases of the era, proposing that established killers may have claimed additional victims under the Zodiac persona. The timeline of known serial offenders active in California during this period provides some intriguing overlaps. The copycat theory suggests that while the initial crimes may have been committed by one individual, later attacks attributed to the Zodiac could have been the work of opportunistic imitators seeking to capitalize on the established fear and notoriety. The abrupt end to verified Zodiac communications in 1974 generates its own theories. Was the Zodiac incarcerated for an unrelated offense? Did he die? Did he relocate to another region where similar crimes occurred under different circumstances? More extreme theories attempt to connect the Zodiac to government programs, occult groups, or organized crime. Theories largely dismissed by serious researchers but persistent in certain circles due to the enduring mystery surrounding the case. The preservation of physical evidence from the Zodiac case has allowed for ongoing testing as technology advances. Techniques unimaginable to the original investigators now offer new avenues for identification. Touch DNA, genetic material left from skin cells when handling paper or other materials, can now be recovered from evidence that previously yielded no usable samples. The stamps and envelope flaps from Zodiac letters continue undergoing periodic retesting. Advanced facial recognition software can now compare the original composite sketches to databases containing millions of photographs from the era, driver's licenses, military ID cards, employment records, searching for potential matches that human reviewers might miss. Artificial intelligence programs trained to analyze handwriting can detect subtle patterns and traits beyond human perception. These programs compare Zodiac letters against vast databases of handwriting samples, searching for matches based on dozens of identification points. Ballistics identification has similarly advanced. The original bullets and shell casings recovered from Zodiac crime scenes can be compared against comprehensive databases of firearms, potentially identifying the specific weapons used even decades later. The Zodiac case has never been officially closed. Evidence remains preserved in climate-controlled facilities. Case files occupy secure storage. Each new detective assigned to the case reviews the entirety of the massive file, sometimes discovering overlooked connections. Periodically, promising leads emerge. A partial DNA match in a database. A deathbed confession requiring verification. A new witness coming forward after decades of silence. Each receives thorough investigation, though many ultimately lead to dead ends. Public interest remains crucial to the investigation. Authorities periodically release updated information or previously withheld details, hoping to jog memories or encourage reluctant witnesses to finally come forward. The passage of time sometimes loosens long-held secrets. The Zodiac case has become a teaching tool for investigators worldwide. The methods developed to investigate this complex case, from linguistic analysis to cryptographic approaches, have influenced how law enforcement approaches other challenging investigations. As recently as 2021, investigators were pursuing new angles on the case. The half-century search for answers continues with the same determination that characterized the original investigation, fueled by advances in technology and refined by modern investigative techniques. Beyond the forensic evidence and psychological profiles lies the human impact of these crimes. 5 families lost loved ones. 2 survivors carried physical and emotional scars throughout their lives. Countless residents of Northern California lived with fear during the height of the Zodiac's activity. The investigators themselves paid a price. Many devoted years to the case, some becoming consumed by the pursuit. Retirements arrived without resolution. Some took their theories and regrets to their graves, never knowing if they had been close to identifying the perpetrator. Media professionals who covered the case faced ethical dilemmas about publishing the letters. Were they enabling the killer's desire for attention? Were they potentially saving lives by complying with his demands? These questions continue informing journalistic ethics discussions today. Communities throughout the region altered their behavior during the Zodiac's active period. Date spots emptied. Taxi drivers refused certain fares. Parents restricted children's activities. The psychological terrorism extended far beyond the immediate victims. The commercialization of the case raises additional ethical questions. Books, films, merchandise, and tours capitalize on public fascination with a mystery. Where's the line between legitimate historical interest and exploitation of tragedy? The debate continues among victims' advocates, media scholars, and the true crime community. The Zodiac case remains what it has been for over 5 decades, an open investigation into a series of crimes that transformed criminal history. The perpetrator, whether deceased or alive, identified or anonymous, created a mystery that continues to captivate because it remains unsolved. Perhaps someday, advanced DNA analysis will provide a name. Perhaps a document will emerge from a forgotten attic. Perhaps someone carrying a half-century secret will finally speak. Until then, the Zodiac remains what he has always been, America's most mysterious murderer. In pursuing the identity of a killer, we ultimately confront ourselves, our fascination with darkness, our need for resolution, our desire to understand the incomprehensible. The Zodiac case endures not just because it remains unsolved, but because it represents the ultimate human mystery. What causes one person to destroy others and then vanish into history? Some mysteries remain hidden, but not forever. Subscribe for more stories that will leave you questioning everything.